Welcome to This Week in Coworking, where industry leaders get succinct, actionable insights.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the This Week in Coworking podcast feed. I am once again your host, Hector Kolonas, and today I'm joined by the amazing, the inspiring Kat Johnson. Kat, how are you?
Hi, Hector. I am doing pretty well. How about you?
Not too bad, not too bad. Thank you for joining in to co-host this week's weekly recap. This is a weekly recap episode. If you're new to the podcast, that just means we're going to dig into some of the more interesting links that we shared in the newsletter this week. But before we do that, our sponsor this week is actually Kat Johnson. Kat is putting on a fantastic new gathering, collective, educational piece. But instead of me telling you about it, Kat, what is the Coworking Creators Summit?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Hector. The Coworking Creators Summit is a 4-hour virtual event that created specifically for the people who are creating within coworking. So marketing teams, community managers, and some space operators who are tasked with doing everything. We're going to dig into strategy, capturing photos, telling your story, differentiating your space, being more consistent with your content, all the things. But this one is specifically for the coworking creators.
I love that. And it's 4 hours, but it's not just going to be Kat for 4 hours. I mean, Kat, you're
Yeah.
awesome, but it's not just going to be you talking about all the things that make you awesome. Who are going to be hosting the sessions?
We have Taylor Mason kicking things off with creating a simple but powerful content distribution strategy. We have Lauren Erlacher talking about finding your creative sweet spot where inner and outer environments align. We have Danny Corbett talking about capturing great photos in your coworking space. We have Dean Connell talking about creative work in progress. We have Garrett Tishy talking about creating an authentic and compelling brand voice. Kristen Fields is covering how storytelling can take your brand to the next level. I'm talking about differentiating your coworking space with content. And Amanda LeFew, who is my co-founder, is talking about nobody cares yet, how to build momentum when you feel invisible.
That's awesome. It does sound like an absolute power bank of leaders, people that, have been in the newsletter before, who've been on your co-working convos before, people who definitely just love to share. Tell us a little bit about the pricing. Like, what is the pricing and who should definitely invest in this?
So there are 2 tiers. You can attend live for $99. For $129, you get recordings and a batch of bonus resources too. We've put a ton of value into the pro tier, and people are welcome to get in wherever they fit in.
I love that. And I'm going to put the links in the show notes. So if you are watching on YouTube, listening on Spotify, wherever you're absorbing this kind of content, go and find those links and definitely sign up to join us at the Content Creators Summit.
Coworking Creator Summit.
That is it. What did I call it? I don't even know. So, Kat, we had a whole bunch of links in the newsletter this week from, upsetting news out of the UK all the way across to celebrations, expansions, collaborations over in Australia. Where do you want to dive in? What caught your attention this week?
Now, a few things definitely caught my attention, but when you just said upsetting news, I guess I'd like to just say, I'm so grateful that in the world that feels like it's upside down now, that we work in coworking where we're focused on community, connection, collaboration, creating a better world. So there's a lot going on right now, and I'm always really grateful to do the work that I do. So that being said, Hector, I think the longest of long tail keywords is, we have to get into that, especially the two of us. We can nerd out on this for a minute.
Yeah, so this is actually a post from a CXO over at Social, and it's actually a screenshot that he shared that looks at what kind of search terms are they getting traffic from via Google. And they have the usual things like co-working space in California, co-working space in LA, co-working space near me. But then they have one piece in there. It looks like a block of text, like someone just typed it in the wrong browser, but it found them, right? And that's what first caught my attention. Are we going to start seeing people treating Google searches as if they were prompts, giving context? I am a graphic designer. I need a space that has a podcast studio and this and that, and entering that as one query as opposed to searching for co-working space and then filtering on an aggregator and then hopefully finding and then sending an email. People are getting really used to just typing everything in one box and the thing that comes out being the good result. So, Kat, I know you and I, we geek out about marketing stuff all the time. What do you think this means for the types of content that we have to put out there so that the search engines know what the hell we do and how to categorize it like that?
Yeah, it was such an interesting thing because it is essentially a prompt that you would feed into AI that somebody fed into Google. So I played with that a little on my own. I'd never seen that. And obviously, like on our phones, it's, we get an AI response sometimes. I put in, like, what's the best park in Park City, Utah to take a 9-year-old who loves biking and big playgrounds? And it triggered an AI response. It was like, for a 9-year-old who loves biking. What was really interesting, though, is I accidentally closed that tab. So I typed it again and it gave me different results, which AI sometimes does, right? When you're like, oh, give me back this and you want it to stay the same, but it gives up something totally different. So that was really interesting. And then I just put in best parks in Park City and, of course, got the map pack and the typical kind of Google response. So this is something I'm spending a lot of time with. That whole prompt into Google thing, I'm just brand new to it right now. But in terms of creating content for AI and Google, it's some really similar things where it's like ask and answer questions, find out what people are already searching for, find out what's out there and make yours better. Like there's some best practices. Use really clear language, like, why does community co-working matter? Or what is co-working community? So AI or Google just has to go, it's right here. Like a lot of it's copywriting, clarity, clear thinking. But it's a really interesting game right now. And it's fun to watch from the sidelines, people who are trying to figure out how relevant is Google? What percentage of search should we still be focusing on that? Should people shift entirely to AI?
It's definitely a topic that we've touched on here on the podcast a few times over the last couple of weeks, just to kind of refresh everybody. We have obviously people choosing AI engines or AI search engines over Google, using prompts instead of keywords. Then you take it one level further and you've got AI browsers where instead of going to Google or going to OpenAI or ChatGPT, you ask the browser, find me 5 different co-working spaces and compare them, show me the prices and produce a report. And the browser does that. So obviously if that becomes more mainstream, what do we need aggregators for? That's another whole hot button topic that I'm just going to leave and park right over there. As people start thinking in this way of giving context, feeding this information into whatever they're engaging with, the interface they're using to access and find and access space, it makes us think a little bit more on the technical side. Now, obviously, Kat, you know this about me. I'm a web development geek, have been most of my life. There's been a shift over the last 10 years to what we're calling semantic web. And this is this idea that you shouldn't just write what your space does. You should use specific schemas within your page descriptions to say, we offer a podcast studio. This is the pricing for that. So that when these bots or agents interact with your page, they're getting the information that they need due to what we call semantic markup, and then use that to put your results above other pages. So this is definitely not a masterclass on that. I'm still looking into it myself, but definitely start exploring, start speaking to your dev teams about what kind of semantic schemas can you put into your pages so that both Google and these AI agents and these AI browsers can understand what's on your page. When you mention things like price, opening hours, availability, there are tags that can make it easier for these systems to understand and interact with your pages. And that's before you go down the whole rabbit hole of e-commerce and on-demand bookings and AI agents to process your leads, and all of these things plug into place. But if they cannot find you, it doesn't matter. So that's just some food for thought from what I'm seeing. Kat, and I wonder if you also kind of saw this correlation in this week's newsletter. For folks who are listening in, this is week 37's newsletter. If you want to follow along and see what are we talking about, go over to thisweekincoworking.com and click on week 37 of 2025. So in the newsletter, there was 4 different stories that I like to group together under this idea of the ecosystem of work. The shift away from I have my base co-working space and that's the only place I go to I have a co-working space. I use lounges when I travel. I use pods in hotels. I use all these different types of places to work. And we saw a few different stories this week. I'm going to run through them first before we dive into a little bit of a chat about that, Kat. So the first one was from the team over at Pebble. We've covered them a bit in the newsletter before. They are the X-Room co-founders. So folks who created those pods, they're now creating a network of pods that are free to use in exchange for sponsorship and partnerships of that. We had the CEO write an article this week who was looking at how they originally thought they were going to have tens of thousands of these pods around America so people could always access them, but instead are seeing that it's actually a add-on to the co-working. It's not going to replace co-working. It's actually going to be something that you use when you're not in your space, when you're in a place where your co-working space can't build a whole community vibe. This is a really interesting topic because we've seen it happen in the past, right? Airport lounges, all these different 3rd or 3.5 spaces. Everyone was like, are they going to compete with co-working? Is this something that we have to worry about as operators? Is this something we should be treating as a threat or as an opportunity? So before I go into the next ecosystem of spaces, what do you think? Are these networks of pods a value, like an additional layer of workspace, or are they just something you don't even use?
I mean, I don't know, Hector. Like, one of the groups I feel like gets overlooked a lot in the evolution of co-working is members who are in spaces day after day. And it's like, yes, if there's an airport pod, I'm going to hop in there and take a call. Yes, different things like that. Like, there's a phone booth at our local library. I always see people working out of there. From a member perspective, I really appreciate being able to hop around. Like, as a member of Kiln, there are more and more locations that I can hop around. If I'm down in the valley, if I'm in Lehigh, if I'm in Provo, if I'm up here, makes it super easy to go and do some work. As far as pod hopping, that's not something that would work for me because I really love having a home space and my community and friends here. But I definitely don't think that pods are a threat to co-working.
I agree with you, Kat, and it's really interesting to think about how do the real members of co-working spaces, not folks who just happen to pop in from time to time. Let me ask you something about that. When you access another Kiln space, do you use an app to book it before you get there, or do you just rock up and be like, hey, I'm Kat, I'm in the park, whatever location?
Yeah.
What's your experience with using another Kiln location?
Yeah,
What
so
do you
if I book that, just change the location and book it. If I'm just going there to work, I can pop in. My fob works at several of the locations. And I think anyone I went to, they could activate that if I was going to be there for a while. But yeah, I book it if I need it, or I just show up and work.
I love that. And that's actually what my point was to the Pebble co-founders. Wouldn't it be great if they made partnerships with companies like Kiln, where a Kiln member can access that space without having to sign up for a secondary app, another system? If you happen to be going to a conference and you need to hop on to do a sponsor call or host a video series or hop onto a podcast because all the meeting rooms are full in your space for whatever reason, that makes these pods so much more valuable networks to have them, but also to the members like yourselves who it's an extra level of service that doesn't really cost Kiln anything. So that's the point I wanted to make to the Pebble founders. But on the topic of true members of co-working spaces, we did also see a post from a member of WorkBar. Similar concept, really just sharing how throughout a week period, they were able to jump from one location to another based on what was happening in their life, what was happening in their family. And I just loved highlighting that because a lot of people think just because you have a static home, you'll never really use the reciprocal or the network effect. But it is just a good reminder to be like, sometimes life happens, right? And you may need a workspace that isn't your normal workspace. So it's great to kind of see that and highlight that as an option with all these networks growing now of co-working spaces.
Yeah, I absolutely love WorkBar. I love the team. I love what they're doing. And they are the co-working brand in Boston, right? They just have it on lock. And being a regional brand like that is a huge benefit to the members. Just be, this neighborhood, that neighborhood, this neighborhood, that neighborhood. It's so easy.
I completely agree. And I am waiting. I remember we had Sarah Travers on the podcast a few months ago, and she's like, we're going to be outside of Boston soon. And we're still waiting to announce that. So keep an eye on the newsletter for as soon as we can. Two other ecosystem of work type of stories. And they are very, very different. One is the kind of workation side where hotels are really investing in this. How do we create a digital nomad friendly or remote worker friendly offering so that people not only stay in the hotel but work from there? And on the flip side of that, we're seeing this huge trend of what they called mall working. So using a mall's breakout spaces, I guess, instead of a co-working space. So let's start with the workation side. I know that this is something that we've discussed in the past a few times, and it's definitely a trend we're seeing. What are your thoughts around the mall working? I'm sorry, of the workation. Are co-working spaces now competing with hotels again? Because for a long time they had meeting rooms, but they weren't cool, they weren't fun, they weren't good looking, right? And so people migrated to co-working spaces. Is this hotel striking back, or do you think there is some sort of opportunity here?
Oh, this is such a big one. I don't think they're a threat to co-working because a great co-working space would always be like the sticky home away from home for people that they want to be. And I love that we're like pushing at the bounds of it. The workation thing, I really like big picture. I like the idea of housing and workspace kind of intermingling like that may be something that, when I'm at retirement age or something, want to do something like that. Of co-living, I love all these things where it's like, I don't want to just like, age in isolation. So I love that things like this are coming up. I'm also one of those crazy people who, like, I went on a 2-week vacation to Hawaii with my family, and I was crazy just lounging. I was like, oh, this is insane. If I had a place where I could work and do some things and be creative and do what I do that wasn't just in the condo we were staying and maybe meet some people, connect with the locals, like that's super interesting to me. So I like seeing that we're having conversations, that new projects are popping up.
Yeah, I mean, it's also really interesting. We are seeing more and more modern boutique hotels really leaning into this. We're not only a hotel, we're also a member club, we're also a spa, we're also a co-working space.
Yeah.
And really creating that local nomad bond. The social space, the social place, I believe, is a network of them over in Europe who are doing this phenomenally. But it's also a really interesting model because as more of these hotels start offering these spaces, what is the differentiator other than the community, right? Because a lot of people are cost driven or location driven. My answer to that is it's great to have the ability to access those spaces too, right? I do not think that every use case can always be answered by one type of co-working space or one membership. And so I'm a pretty big believer that we will have multi-brand, multi-location memberships or passes that you have your home base and then you can still access these other spaces through reciprocal memberships or being able to access it through partnerships, much like the airlines have their airline partnerships and you can hop on other planes even though you are a United or an American or a Delta customer. So that's kind of just something.
Maybe the play, Hector, is, and I've seen, I forget what the brand was, but maybe the play here is spaces partnering with hotels for like micro spaces that then are doing lead gen for the home space. I'm not sure house, but it's the same way I think about libraries. If you can be an entry point for people to learn about co-working and then give them a compelling reason to go check out the actual space and community, that becomes interesting. But then it's like, are those spaces, is there someone running them? Is there a community manager? Is it just a hotel lobby that looks nicer?
And it's something that I'm very, very interested in because we're also seeing a lot of operators become a lot leaner on how many people are needed to run specific spaces. And we're seeing this idea that one community manager can run 3 spaces that are close together, or 3 community managers can run 6 spaces, whatever is the right algorithm or the right formula. But it makes me wonder, is there not an opportunity here for an operator who has their tech dialed in, has their ops in place, has their branding and their playbooks to start managing these spaces and then using them as lead gen for their main space, kind of like satellite pop-ups, really.
Yeah.
And that really brings me back to the last story in this kind of ecosystem of space thread line that I've somehow drawn between these different stories. And that is this whole idea of mall working, right? It's a funny concept to think about that people are going to use a mall instead of a co-working space. But I went back and looked at, is there any previous trends that point to the fact that retail wants to be co-working spaces? And we saw Saks did it. We saw a few other very large brands. I think Brookfield did their own co-working spaces for a while. Simon Malls did their own co-working spaces for a while. And they ran them as co-working spaces, not as kind of a lounge thing that people go work at. But only successful ones were run by people who run co-working spaces. And they kind of partnered up to do micro locations. I know Industrious does this a lot. They run kind of indie, smaller hubs that then feed back into their ecosystem that they're building. So it's just a really interesting idea of retailers need to drive footfall. Malls, especially in most of the world, need to get more people to come to the malls more often so they can charge higher rents or charge rents at all. There is a kind of mall crisis happening across most of America right now. So it's really interesting to see where co-working will fit into that. I just wanted to talk about one more point that you mentioned a bit earlier, Kat, and that is this idea of mixing residential and co-working in this kind of multi-use community. The next podcast that's going to drop on Monday is actually digging into the missing middle, which is a trend around building spaces, around communities, walkable cities. So definitely listen out for that. It is all about the things that Kat just mentioned. So that is the things that caught my mind. Kat, was there anything else that you wanted to touch on before we hop out for this week?
Just on the mall thing, it's interesting. This goes back to my days writing for Shareable, where especially in the States, we have these massive malls and a lot of them have just closed. They're empty. They used to be like these vibrant hubs for everybody, and now they're ghost towns. So it's interesting to think about what we could do with them. Definitely in places where there are housing shortages, which are a lot of places, there's an interesting thing of like, could this facility be housing, just like a mixed development space that also had co-working? I think in that case, you have to have, it has to be an experience unto itself. Like you walk in and it doesn't feel at all like you're in the mall. First record store jobs was in a mall, and it gets really old really fast, right? Because there's a whole thing going on there. But if you could create a door from the parking lot would be great. There's some little design things that I think would be necessary, but there's just an abundance of it. But there's tons of parking. People already know about it. Kiln is converting a huge mall down in the valley into one of their new locations. So there's a lot of potential there. And I think that one of the benefits is people are already used to going there. So I'm really interested and curious to see what we're going to do with malls, and why not? Why not be co-working?
Yeah, I mean, co-working could be the magnet, right? That if people are coming there every day, that allows you to have restaurants, allows you to have bodegas, allows you to do all the things. If there's no one there, you don't really need them. But you actually picked up on a really good point, and that is the parking. The amount of aggregators I work with, and like the number one search thing is, where is it and is there parking?
Yep.
So this is just a huge opportunity for the right operator and the right planning. As you mentioned, you have to have access to the street. You have to be able to get there easily, not have to wait through rush hour to get there if it's in a transit hub. But yeah, it's a really, really interesting trend. I'm definitely sure we're going to see more and more of it. But on that note, Kat, where can people find out more about you and the summit and all things Kat Johnson?
Thank you, Hector. So just over at catjohnson.co, it's cat with a C if you haven't seen it in the wild. From there, you can learn about Coworking Creators Summit, save your spot for the next Coworking Convo. We have one every month, so check that out. That's just a free and open event to help co-working space operators learn, share, and connect. The blog is active and try to make that interesting and connect different ideas over there. But yeah, catjohnson.co is where you can find everything.
If you forgot to mention it, or there's just so much amazingness that you do, check out Kat's Lab. It is a fantastic community for community builders. Check that out and definitely hop in there. And if you do join the lab, I'll see you in her Slack. Otherwise, until next time, we'll be back in your feed sometime soon. Thank you all for joining us and look after yourselves out there.